like to talk today about two ways of learning, and I talk about this all the time. It's a kind of a staple of this way of thought because the basic premise is that we have a mind, an intellectual mind, and all of us use this. And it is the level of our mind that most of our educational system is based on. And that is, it's based on learning facts. And it's a very important thing to have to get along on this planet, to be able to think things through, to be able to come up with ideas, to execute them, plans and direction that we want our life to go, and so on. And the part that is overlooked by so much of the world is the intuitive side, the intuitive way of learning. We don't really know what that means. We don't know what that is in a spiritual context. The idea of meditation used to be kind of thought of as a negative word, relegated only to the New Age community that worship crystals and channelers and all the things that are strange to most people. But it's become more of a used term, but it's still fashionable. Fashionable to the degree that it's sort of disconnected from what the mystics meant by the practice of meditation, practicing the presence of God. There's a portal in us, a doorway that opens up to the infinite. And that is a concept to most of us, but when it becomes an experience, we think of it in a totally different way. It changes the way we think. It changes our thought process because it changes our understanding of who and what we are at the deepest level. The intellectual associates itself with the body and the history of the body and all of the things that we have been through, the economics, the politics, just the social arena that we grew up in, and the kinds of people we surrounded ourselves with, the friends that we draw, all of the externals, the place we live, and we associate that with ourselves to the point where we have lost sight of that spiritual dimension. And it's not that we want to put all of the intellectual things aside. We don't want to do that. That's part of who and what we are. But it's the surface part. And what we want to do is open ourselves to something deeper. When I grew up in Missouri, and there, it's a little bit different than from here in terms of water. There you can drill a well almost any place because the water table is right there near the surface. And if you buy land out in the country someplace, you can drill a well and you'll strike water, and that's where your water will come from, unless pipes are run out there like we have to do here. There's the well that is able to tap into the groundwater, and then there's a cistern. We had a cistern also, and that holds water. Water doesn't come in except through rain or through. There would be times that the well would run dry. You'd have to buy water and put it in the cistern. But the well is self-supplied, and the cistern is not. What is in the cistern depends on the outside. Whatever's in there has to come from the outside. It has to be hauled in some way or brought in by rain. But the well, if it's a good well, it doesn't run dry because it's tapped into possibly a spring. I remember when I was a little kid, I had a bicycle, of course, all little kids do almost. And we lived in a small town, At the time, about 500, 600 people or so. I think it's about maybe double that by now. Very small town. But my grandparents lived on a farm, a 250-acre farm that was about 5 miles away. And an adventure that I discovered was to get on my bicycle and ride out into the country to my grandparents' farm. And that was a big deal. 5 miles is nothing to most bike riders these days. They don't think anything about 5 miles. That's just the warm up. But when you're about 10, 11 years old or so, and you're going through country roads, gravel. It's all gravel and dirt. It's quite an adventure. It was quite an adventure. And back then, we never thought about carrying water. I don't know. Now we don't go anywhere without water. But we just never thought about it. So this little kid gets on the bike and goes out, to grandparents' farm, and about halfway through that trip, and it was probably over 100 degrees, in Missouri, and at the time I would do this, I would always pick the best times to travel. Humidity at least 90%, just horrible. So this adventure, it had some dangers built into it, and part of the route would be to ride my bike through Rattlesnake Hollow. Nobody ever saw a rattlesnake. That's just what it was called, and we were sure they were there, and it was very dangerous to go through it. But I would do that. But anyway, I was dying of thirst on this adventure, and ran into this a spring that was coming up in a ditch. I'd never seen it before because I'd never been, you see things on a bicycle you don't normally see in a car. So I saw it there, and it was some of the best water I think I've ever had. I don't know if I would do that today, if I would drink that water today, but it was, very, very good. But it was coming from, someplace I couldn't see. And that, to me, I've always thought about that in terms of, if you're going through your life and you're on this adventure and you're having some problem, you're feeling a lack of some kind, there's always a spring there, and that's the Spirit. It's this inner life force that is in us. And anytime you feel just totally lost, anytime you feel that your life is just not working and things are just not going any direction that you want, if you will pause, get off your bike, and take a drink from this spring, it'll refresh you in a way that no other thing can, because it not only refreshes you, it gives you the strength to go forward, to move forward, and it gives you a better insight into what's going on. So many of the trials and tribulations we go through, we're doing it on an intellectual and emotional basis, and I'm treating the emotion here same way I'm treating the intellect. There's an emotional side to us. You can be emotionally out of control. Has anyone here ever been emotionally out of control? And after you lose it, a few minutes later, you wonder why you did that. And that's not the kind of emotion that is involved in the spiritual journey. This is a surface emotion, just like the intellect. It's the intellectual counterpart to a surface thought and feeling. So you touch this inner place, and it levels you out. It calms your emotion. It calms your thoughts. It calms everything. It actually is refreshing, and you have the strength then to go on. And just to know that it's there always with you, always as a healing force, always as a balancing force. Jesus talked about it in just a little bit different way, but I have always been drawn to this statement. He said, "Enter by the narrow gate." The narrow gate. For the gate is wide, and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter it by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. The gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. You see, we're talking about a spiritual approach to life that's not easy. And why isn't it easy? Because we're not used to doing it. We're not used to thinking, this could be a solution to my problem, whatever my problem is. And so if I recommend, you want to deal with your problems successfully, take up the practice of meditation, and people's eyes normally roll, and well, I've tried that, and I can't get my mind to stop. And because the mind that's the wide gate. Your mind is in the wide gate. It's looking at all the facts, and it's trying to figure everything out. And I think Jesus was really pretty brilliant with this explanation, that it's like two gates. One's wide. Everybody's going through that one. That's surface consciousness, collective consciousness. It's the human side of us, the intellectual side of us. Everybody's going through that gate. Everybody understands that, problem solving, and a lot of it can be done on that level. But you can solve your problems on that level and still feel something's missing, still feel something's gone. It's sort of like drinking Kool-Aid or something that doesn't quite quench your thirst, as opposed to just good water. So there's this level, and it's a narrow gate in that very few people know it's there. Again, meditation's become a very common word that is used quite often. But very few actually drop down into that level beneath the fighting, the mental, emotional fighting. Drop down into that level of being where we know everything's okay, because the issues down here don't exist that are up here. They don't exist. And that's a difficult thing for us to understand. How could my problems not exist at a deeper level in myself? I'm the one having the problem. But it's this idea that we have two gates in us. We have this wide gate, this intellect, and we have this narrow gate, this, I call it the intuitive portal. It's an entrance into the infinite. And it's sort of like if you picture an hourglass. You've got this big thing that's shaped like an hourglass, and the top, think of that as the intellect, and you drop down through that narrow passage, that intuitive portal, into something that's equally as big. And in reality, the spiritual dimension is much bigger than that, but it's a good illustration. It's a passageway. And so we sit down to be still, and most of our attention remains in that top portion of the hourglass. It's thinking about, the thing we did yesterday, or what problem we're trying to overcome, or whatever. We're having this orgy of thought that is all centered on that level. It's in the upper part of the hourglass. And the letting go is allowing, like the sand, to drop through, to fall through, to let natural gravity take us down into that level, not to solve problems, because what I just said is a pretty profound thing. Not that because I said it, but the problem that you have doesn't exist in the bottom half of the hourglass. It's not there. It doesn't exist. There's no problem there. And so dropping down into that part of us, it doesn't solve the problems up here. It solves your perception. It gives you a new perception, gives you new strength, new power. And then as you go back up into that upper part, you see the problem from a different point of view. And that makes a lot of difference. It makes a tremendous amount of difference how you see it. If, for example, you have, let's say you're a millionaire, you suddenly you have $1 million, and you are hungry, and you're choices are, what restaurant am I going to go to, or what grocery store will I go to buy my food? That's one perspective. Say that you have not a penny to your name and you're hungry. It's the same problem, but it's a completely different perspective. One level you have no resources, and the other level you do. And so you think of it totally differently. And that's what meditation does. It gives us new resources. It gives us a new understanding of the power that we have at the spiritual level. And as long as we're up here in the upper part of the hourglass reacting to all of the things, that's the wide gate. And that's where most people go. And you go talk to your friends, I've got this problem, and they give you all the advice, and it's usually all in that upper part of that hourglass. Very few people will recommend, I'm guessing, and it's an educated guess, very few people will recommend dropping down into yourself, into your deeper levels in the practice of meditation. It's understood at some level, but it does not seem practical. It doesn't seem like a practical solution. But what I just said, you have money in one place, you have a condition of hunger, you see it from a different perspective. It's just a little bit of an inconvenience. Or it's an opportunity. You don't see it as anything negative. I'm hungry, let's go eat. But if you're in a place where you don't have money, and that's the problem, and I've actually been there, and probably many of you have too, and it's a totally different perspective. It's a totally different way of looking at things. When you have no resources, you will react in fear. You'll react with this heaviness that compounds the problem. But when your resources are adequate, then you don't even react to it. You just respond. But it's a completely different mindset. One is a wide gate, one is a narrow gate in terms of we want the more resources. We find the more resources through the narrow gate that very few people find. Khalil Gibran has been quoted millions of times through the years, but he said, when you reach the end of what you should know, you will be at the beginning of what you should sense. And that's pretty interesting, because I don't know what happens. Well, I do know what happens to us. When you are dealing with something you don't know the answer to, you don't know how to solve a problem, you will reach a point where something gives way, and you'll be okay with it. You'll figure out something to do, or someone might give you a suggestion, and it changes the whole way you think. And maybe nothing on the outer changes, but you have discovered some new resource. You've discovered new enthusiasm, a new level of energy, a new way of thinking. You know, the enthusiasm, that new life force, that new spring water that you discover, it causes the cogs to start turning, causes the ideas to start coming. And that's really our prosperity. That's really our resource. And so what if we learned how to trigger that? And one of the reasons we don't trigger it is because we usually are trying to solve our material problems through simply material means. And so we never drop down into the area where we actually draw upon these deeper resources. And that's one of the drawbacks, or one of the problems with prosperity, is it if we solve all of our problems just with money, we never tap into that deeper level of ourselves. And that's not to say that people with money are not creative, because that has nothing to do with it. It's just that if we depend on external resources to solve internal problems, it'll never happen. We'll never quite do it. And that's why people turn to crutches and things outside of themselves to help bolster their self-esteem and all, because they have not touched that lower part of the hourglass. They have not entered the narrow gate. So when you reach the end of what you should know, and that is, I don't know how to solve this problem kind of thing, I reached that point, you are at the beginning of what you should sense, and that's where the deeper thing is touched in us, the deeper level is touched, and a different direction often comes. In mainstream Christianity, this is how it's interpreted. The wide gate is the way that leads to hell. It's the way that does not embrace the Christian plan of salvation. And I've heard Christians say that if you're not Christian, you'll go to hell. Have any of you heard that? That people say that? It's hard to believe that we would think that, with a God as large as God would be. But I guess God is not that big in some perspectives. But that was always a question in the church I grew up in. I mean, not always, but it came up several times. And it was just a matter of fact. If you're not a Christian, you won't be saved. And I remember some woman asked about, what about all the Buddhists, Hindus, all the different people of different faiths? That's why the evangelist is so important. That's why these churches send out so many evangelists, so we can save the whole world. The narrow gate is those who are Christians. Those are the ones that actually practice Christianity or that adopt Christianity. That's the narrow gate. So that's how it's interpreted. But I don't think that's how Jesus meant it. And I have no proof of that. It's just my own spiritual logic. He's referring to two kinds of perceptions. The wide gate is, as I've been talking about, the sensus perception, and the narrow gate is the intuitive. When you think of it from this point of view, now he's talking to people, and what's interesting is none of Jesus' audience were Christians. You ever think about that? So they had a problem right off the bat. If we put it in the normal Christian way of thought, they were Jews. And there were people of all kinds of strange faiths in that culture also. It wasn't just, it's not just a monoculture. But he's, I don't think, talking about religion at all. He's talking to everybody that's there. He's talking to the Baal worshiper and the good Jew and just whatever. There were so many kinds of religions that were interwoven in that culture that it's not near as clear cut as we think it is, as we think it was. But I don't think he's talking about religion. He's talking about you have this ability to look out at the world and get into all these problems, have all these problems, but here's a way to get past that. Here's a way built in you. It's part of your system, part of your makeup. It allows you to drop into your center of power, which does empower you to and inspire you to go another direction. And so many of the answers that we seek in life are not magic thunderbolts out of the skies. They're things that just gradually unfold. It's a way that we can't see it back here, but as we take steps forward, we begin to see how things unfold. But if you're so totally immersed in the problem, the chances are very good you won't see, as quickly anyway, the thing that you need to see. But if you are relaxed and empowered, you are much clearer. I've asked the question before, if you were in, say you had a car wreck and you needed help, would you rather have someone there that's just running around frantic, or would you rather have someone that knows what they're doing and is centered and knows exactly what to do? That's the kind of people we want. And they see more. Beth and I came upon a motorcycle crash one time, and we were right behind the motorcycle, and they just hit this curb and bounced off and hit a guardrail. And we stopped along with several other people. But a nurse stopped, and she was obviously the one that if I were in that condition, I would want her there, attending me. Because none of us knew what to do. We knew not to touch anybody and not, to move anybody around. But she was proactive. She moved in and just handled the situation until a larger group of people showed up. But you see that, and if you're having any kind of situation with your house repair or anything, you want people that know what they're doing. You want people that are present and can see the bigger picture. Here's why this thing is doing this. Not speculation on, why might this be happening. So that's what I'm saying is that we have a resource in us that puts us in that place. So if you're having something going on right now, you say, I don't know what to do, my life is a mess, and it's going in the wrong direction. Just stop and think about this and sit down, take time to actually sit down in a comfortable position and just begin to let yourself go. Begin to relax. Begin to open yourself to this deeper power. You don't have to know how it works, but you do know how it works because you've experienced it all your life in your high moments. But it is a calming, empowering presence, very natural. It's not foreign, it's very natural. It comes up to the upper levels of our awareness. One of the meanings of the word tuition is instruction. Intuition means to be instructed from within. In our educational models, intuitive learning is the less common approach, and that, to me, is extremely unfortunate. You have to go to a place like this or, some spiritual group practice to open up the intuitive side. It would have been great. What if we would have been taught this from day one in school? Just that we have this inner resource. And maybe instead of a nap, we would have taken time to meditate and learned how to be centered, learn how to center ourselves within ourselves. Census-based instruction, on the other hand, looks to the outer conditions and appearances as its primary source of knowledge and is the method of learning upon which our entire educational system is based, which is true. But when you think about that, we're not the intellect. That's a faculty we have. We are the intuition. We are what we find at the intuitive level. That's what we really are. We're putting facts in our head through education, and we need that. That's a good thing. But we are totally excluding the thing that will solve and help put everything together. It's sort of like I was talking to my mother yesterday. She said she just got a new jigsaw puzzle, 2,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, which I have no time to mess with stuff like that, but she loves doing that kind of stuff. But one of the things you do with those, I know, is you look at the cover of the box. That's what you want to end up with. In a sense, that's what meditation does. It drops us into that level where we see the larger picture. And then we can put the blue sky, we pull that out, and we pull out the car, and we pull out different colors. It begins to make sense when you see the whole picture. And that's empowering. If you don't have that picture, then you're not quite sure where to go with the whole thing. It would, instead of taking 10 years to put it together, take 20 years to put it together. The spiritual path involves stilling the senses-based distractions and practice opening our minds and hearts to the still small voice of God within. The very fountainhead of all the good we seek in life is found within us. You've heard this 1,000 times and probably more. But that's what the spiritual path is. It's here. It's the act of becoming still, opening ourselves to that deeper level, that deeper self. Those who learn to go within discover an abiding wisdom that allows them to look beyond appearances, but to see a grander truth of greater good unfolding through all the many changes they encounter in life. And that's it. Meditation is not, we should not think of it as a problem-solving device. We should think of it as an empowering, a tool that empowers us to see the larger picture, to see that box, that picture on the box of the puzzle. Okay? So if you've got something going on, try this and see how it works. All right, thanks for coming out. Hope to see you next week.
You've been watching a talk presented at the Unity Church of Grand Junction by Reverend Doug Bator. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado, as well as those of you who are joining us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Also, please feel free to share this video with anyone you think might be interested or benefit from this message. If this video brought value to your life, please consider making a donation by clicking the link below to our PayPal donation account. Thanks again so much for watching.